No one likes getting calls in the wee hours of the morning. The sound of the phone, in that deep silence of the night, has something almost frightening about it. For Margaret, that sudden ring was like a scream from the past. She hadn't received calls at that hour since her husband passed away over a decade ago. Her heart raced before she even answered. With trembling hands, she picked up the phone and stared at the display. Unknown number. A part of her wanted to ignore it, go back to sleep, and pretend nothing had happened. But there was something about the call. Something that felt more like a call than a simple phone call. When she finally answered, a voice on the other end nearly made her drop the phone. It was Jennifer. Her daughter. The same one she hadn't spoken to in over 20 years. Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all His infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for He will never abandon us, for His love is eternal and infinite. I also want to take this opportunity to ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me a lot, thank you. For a few seconds, Margaret couldn't say a word. She only heard the breathing on the other end. It was like hearing an echo of a time she'd been trying to bury for years. Jennifer's voice was low, almost whispered, as if she, too, were fighting back tears. "Mom, it's me." Margaret felt the weight of the years settle on her shoulders. So many silent Christmases, so many forgotten birthdays. So many Sunday mornings in church, staring at the empty pews beside her, imagining what it would have been like if Jennifer had been there. And now, she was there, even if only through a phone line. But why? Jennifer hesitated before continuing. "I know it's late. I just needed to hear your voice." Those words pierced Margaret like an arrow. So many nights she'd prayed to hear it. And now that she did, she didn't know what to say. It was as if everything she'd rehearsed over the years had vanished from her mind. "Are you okay?" Margaret finally asked, her voice cracking, almost imperceptible. So, Jennifer replied. "I'm on a road here near Knoxville. The car broke down. And I thought if I died tonight, I never would have told you I missed you." That was like a punch in the gut. Margaret pressed the phone to her face, as if she could touch her daughter's face with that gesture. "Where exactly are you?" she asked. "Near a church, that Baptist one by the road. Remember?" Margaret knew that place. She had prayed there so many times, never knowing that one day it would be their reunion. Without a second thought, Margaret slipped on her slippers and grabbed her car keys. She was already an elderly woman, but that night, love gave strength to her tired legs. As she drove through the quiet city streets, she remembered every detail of Jennifer's childhood. The laughter in the backyard, the pancakes on Saturday mornings, and the last look they exchanged. That last look. It was at Christmas. They had fought. Things were said that should never have been said. And since then, silence. Time passed, the hurt remained. Jennifer left and never returned. Margaret, out of pride, or fear, never reached out. And now, so many years later, that connection. As she rounded the corner and saw the church illuminated by the yellow light of the street lamp, Margaret felt butterflies in her stomach. The same butterflies she'd felt when she'd taken Jennifer to the doctor when she was little. She parked the car slowly, afraid it was all just a dream. But it wasn't. There was Jennifer, sitting on the sidewalk, her knees drawn up and her eyes red. Margaret got out of the car without saying a word. For a moment, she stood there, staring at her daughter as if seeing her for the first time. Jennifer looked up slowly. Time had passed for both of them. The wrinkles told different stories, but the eyes... oh, the eyes still held that same old sparkle. "You came," Jennifer said, almost in disbelief. Margaret just nodded, her eyes welling up. "I always would. I just needed you to call me." They stared at each other in silence for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. And then, something neither of them expected happened. Jennifer burst into tears, and Margaret hugged her as if she had never stopped being her mother. In that embrace, so many years of pain, pride, resentment, and silence dissolved. It was as if time had paused, allowing two wounded souls to reunite. The church sidewalk, in that instant, became an altar of reconciliation. And what no one knew was that that moment was only the beginning of something much greater. Jennifer hadn't told her everything yet. She had a reason for being there, And it wasn't just the broken car. There was something more. Something Margaret couldn't yet imagine. But God already knew. Because in every tearful prayer, He was listening. And now, He was beginning to answer, in His own time, as He always does. They entered the church, only to shelter from the early morning wind. But as they sat in the last pew, they began to talk. About the past, about what was lost, about what could still be saved. Jennifer told them about her life away from home, about the mistakes she'd made, the places she'd been. Margaret listened silently, holding her daughter's hand as if holding a promise. And then came the first revelation. Jennifer wasn't alone on that road. She had someone in the car. Margaret was confused. "Who's with you?" Jennifer hesitated for a few seconds, then answered, "My daughter. Your granddaughter." Time seemed to stop again. Margaret blinked several times, as if she hadn't heard correctly. A granddaughter. A life she never knew existed. Jennifer led her to the car, where a girl of about 10 was curled up asleep in the back seat. Her name was Emily. And the first thing Margaret said upon seeing that little face was, "She has your father's smile." The three looked at each other. 3 generations, separated by years of silence, united by an unlikely reunion. But there was something strange in Jennifer's eyes. A sadness hidden behind hope. Margaret noticed, but said nothing. Not yet. Sometimes the soul needs time to open up. That early morning, they walked home together. Margaret made hot chocolate, as she used to. Emily laughed out loud for the first time. And for a moment, everything felt right. But not everything was as it seemed. Jennifer had an urgent reason for making that call. A reason that involved time, forgiveness, and news that would change everything again. Margaret, deep down, felt this. And even without knowing exactly what would come next, she chose to trust. After all, when God begins to move, nothing is by chance. Emily slept in the room that had once been Jennifer's. Margaret lay awake, sitting in the armchair, staring out the window at the night. Her thoughts drifted far and wide. In her heart, a mixture of gratitude and unease. She knew this story was just beginning. And what would come next was something no one could have predicted. The next morning, the sun streamed through the bedroom's flowered curtains as if heralding a new era. Margaret woke early, but not out of habit. A weight on her chest kept her restless. She knew there was something Jennifer hadn't told her yet. It was that strange silence, that hesitation in her eyes. Something deep. Something ancient. Jennifer appeared in the kitchen, her eyes tired, but there was a subtle serenity on her face. "Did you sleep well?" Margaret asked, trying to sound casual. "More than I expected," Jennifer replied, picking up a mug for coffee. The two tried to maintain a normal conversation, but there was a tension in the air neither of them could ignore. "Emily is beautiful. So sweet," Margaret commented. Jennifer smiled, but her eyes quickly shifted. "She's my blessing," she said, her tone concealing more than it revealed. Margaret didn't press the issue. She'd learned from life that asking too many questions can drive fragile people away. But the Holy Spirit was already whispering something in her heart. Prepare yourself. While Emily drew in the living room with crayons, Jennifer and Margaret remained in the kitchen. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." The words were uttered like someone pulling on the rope of a ship about to depart. Margaret dropped the dishcloth and sat down. "Go ahead, daughter. Whatever it is, God has already brought us this far." But what she would hear, she never expected. "Remember that night, before I left?" Jennifer began, her eyes welling up. Margaret nodded, feeling her throat dry. "That fight, that argument, it wasn't just about dinner or my work." Margaret felt a chill. She knew there was more to that argument. Something that had been kept hidden for all these years. Jennifer took a deep breath, then blurted out, "That night, I found out I was pregnant." The ground seemed to disappear beneath Margaret's feet. "But you never told me." Jennifer nodded, fighting back tears. "I knew you wouldn't approve. I was young, confused, and the child's father was someone you didn't know." Margaret put her hand to her mouth, trying to absorb the information. "But why didn't you tell me? I was your mother," Jennifer cried. I thought you were going to send me away, or worse, force me to take the baby away. I was so scared." Margaret felt a lump in her throat. She never would have done that. But she understands now the depth of loneliness her daughter carried. Jennifer said she left home that night with only a backpack and $500 borrowed from a friend. She spent the first few months at the home of an elderly woman named Dorothy, who welcomed her like a granddaughter. She was from the church. She taught me how to truly pray. She was the one who helped me understand that God hadn't abandoned me. Throughout those years, Jennifer raised Emily alone. She worked as a waitress, then as a nursing assistant. She struggled, facing nights unsure if she could pay the rent. But she never lost faith. I remembered what you said, that God sustains us even when everything seems to be falling apart. Margaret wept silently. She felt guilt, of course. But she also felt pride. Her daughter, so strong, so resilient, even distant, even silent, had kept the flame of faith alive. And now, there before her, were the fruits of that silence. Painful, yes, but also sacred. But there was more. Jennifer hesitated. "Emily's father," she began, staring into her coffee cup, "he tried to come back, years later." Margaret's eyes widened. "Did he meet her?" Jennifer shook her head. "He wanted to get back together, he wanted to come out, but something was wrong. He was dark." Margaret felt a chill. Jennifer said that for a while, she let herself be fooled. She thought maybe it would be possible to rebuild her family. But he started showing up with strange behavior, lies, and debts. And then one night, he disappeared. He never came back. Margaret was in shock. "Did you tell the police?" Jennifer nodded. But no one found anything. It was like he vanished. And then came the second revelation. There's something no one knows. Not even Emily. Margaret held tightly to the table. "I saved a letter. He left me one before he disappeared." Jennifer pulled an aged envelope from her purse. The edges were yellowed, and it smelled of old paper. "I've never had the courage to open it. Until today." Margaret took the envelope with trembling hands. "Do you want to open it now?" Jennifer shook her head. "No. I want you to open it. You always knew how to see what I couldn't." Margaret took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, handwritten in shaky handwriting. And the contents were a blow. "If you're reading this, it's because I'm gone. I'm not who you think I am. I've been hiding something for many years. And now, I need you to protect Emily. She's at risk." Margaret gasped. Jennifer paled. "What do you mean, risk?" Margaret continued reading, but the letter ended abruptly. No explanation. Just fear. Jennifer began to tremble. "Do you think he did something illegal?" Margaret thought for a few seconds. "Daughter, this isn't just a letter. It's a warning." The two were silent for a moment. And Margaret did what she always did. She prayed. "Lord, reveal the truth to us. Protect this child. Show us what we need to know. In Jesus' name. Amen." And at that moment, Emily appeared in the doorway, holding a notebook. "Grandma, look at the drawing I made." Margaret smiled, even though her heart was heavy. She picked up the notebook and saw a drawing of the church, with 3 women holding hands. "It's you, Mommy, and me." Margaret felt tears well up. There was hope amidst the chaos. But what neither of them knew was that someone else was looking for them. Someone who knew about Jennifer's past, and who didn't want certain truths to come to light. That someone was closer than they imagined. And everything would begin to unfold the following Sunday morning. Snow fell slowly that Christmas Eve, painting the streets of Johnson City white. Margaret was in the kitchen, preparing the turkey as she did every year. The house smelled of nutmeg, cinnamon, and longing. Jennifer was locked in her room, listening to loud music, a rock music Margaret could never stand. But it wasn't the music that was the problem. It was the weather. The tension between mother and daughter hung in the air like invisible smoke. For weeks, their conversations had become monologues. Jennifer responded with, "Aha, I see," or simply silence. Margaret tried not to take it personally, but it was impossible not to be hurt. She just wanted a peaceful Christmas. But this year would be anything but. The clock was almost 7 when Jennifer came abruptly downstairs, grabbed her car keys, and said, "I'm not staying here tonight." Margaret, surprised, asked, "What do you mean?" "It's Christmas Eve, Jennifer." The answer was short and sharp, "I'm not in the mood." It was like a slap in the face. "You may not be in the mood, but this house is your home. You should be with your family," Margaret said, her voice cracking. Jennifer snorted. "Family? Since when is this a family?" Margaret's heart nearly stopped. She hadn't expected that. Not like that. That sentence opened an old, deep wound. They began arguing, right there, at the door to the living room. Voices rose, hurt feelings flaring. Margaret spoke of how much she had sacrificed. Jennifer countered by saying she had never felt heard. It was as if years of frustration were being poured out all at once. And then came the sentence that would seal the silence for decades. "If I leave today, I'm never coming back." Jennifer screamed. And Margaret, hurt, responded in the heat of emotion, "Then go. And don't look back." The silence after that was deafening. Jennifer left, slamming the door. Margaret collapsed on the couch, sobbing. The turkey grew cold. The Christmas tree lights continued to flicker as if mocking her pain. That night, Margaret ate dinner alone. 1 plate, 1 glass, 1 napkin. No words, no prayers. She just sat there, staring at the empty chair. The same chair where Jennifer had sat as a child, her braids falling over her shoulders, waiting for the gift hidden in the cupboard. As snow blanketed the street, Margaret opened her Bible for the first time that night. Her eyes fell on Luke 15 verse 20, and she arose and came to her father, and while he was yet a great way off, her father saw him, and was moved with compassion, and ran, and fell on his neck, and kissed him. Margaret wept bitterly. The prodigal daughter was gone. But what no one knew was what was happening on the other side, that very night. Jennifer was driving aimlessly, crying, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. She ended up in a supermarket parking lot, turned off the car, and stayed there for hours. Cold, hungry, and with a pregnancy test in her purse. Yes, that night she already knew. The suspicion had been hanging in the air for weeks. The nausea, the delays, the premonition. And there, in that parking lot, she took the test in the bathroom. 2 little lines. Read, "Positive." Jennifer felt the world spin. She thought about going home. She did. But pride and fear were stronger. She ended up going to the house of a friend, Christy, who lived with her grandmother. She stayed there for 3 nights. Margaret, on the other hand, spent those days as if in mourning. There was no body, but there was absence. She walked around the house gathering clothes, cleaning the room, crying into her pillow. And praying. Always praying. On the morning of the 28th, she wrote a letter. She didn't know the address, but she wrote it anyway. It was a love letter. She asked for forgiveness. She said she was heartbroken. She even missed her daughter's rebelliousness. And it said something she remembers by heart to this day. "You may have left my house, but you never left my heart." The letter was never sent. It was tucked away inside the Bible, among the Psalms. And there it remained for 25 years. Margaret reread it so many times that she knew every line by heart. It was her silent prayer, her plea for reconciliation, her paper hug. But he never had the courage to send it. Until their reunion changed everything. In the present, after the secret was revealed, Jennifer asked, "Do you remember that Christmas?" Margaret took a deep breath. "I remember every detail." Jennifer lowered her eyes. "If I had stayed, maybe everything would have been different." Margaret gently touched her daughter's hand. "Daughter, God doesn't work in ifs. He works in redemption." The two were silent for a moment, until Jennifer said, "I saved that panettone you left in the fridge. I ate it little by little, and I cried with every slice." Margaret smiled through her tears. "You always loved panettone." It was a simple detail, but filled with memory and pain, and also with tenderness. And then came the third revelation. "That night, I wrote a letter too. I never sent it. But it exists." Margaret's eyes widened. "Do you still have it?" Jennifer nodded. "It's in my purse." She took it out carefully, as if handling a relic. The envelope was crumpled, but the handwritten name, Mom, was still visible. Margaret took the letter with trembling hands. She didn't want to open it right away. She preferred to save it for tonight, when she could read it alone, before God. "Today. I think we're going to write a new story, don't you think?" he said. Jennifer nodded. But neither of them knew that their reunion would affect more people than they imagined. That night, Margaret decorated the house with some Christmas lights, even though it was September. "It's just a memory," she said. Emily helped, enchanted by each twinkle of light. Jennifer watched from afar, her eyes welling up. "I was coming home, yes. But I still didn't know what to do with so many truths." Before going to sleep, Margaret took the letter out of her Bible, the one she'd written on December 25th, years ago, and placed it next to Jennifer's letter. 2 letters. 2 women. 2 versions of the same pain. But now, there was something different. A presence. A hope. A new cycle was beginning. And the letters would be read. But the next morning, before she could even open the envelopes, something happened. Margaret received an unexpected visitor at her door. A tall man in a black jacket, holding a briefcase. He didn't give his name. He simply handed her an envelope and said, "This is about Jennifer, and it's not safe to remain silent." And then he left. Margaret closed the door slowly, the envelope in her hands. Inside was an old photo. Jennifer, very young, standing next to a man Margaret had never seen. But there was something in those eyes. Something she recognized immediately. A shiver ran down her spine. And a certainty arose in her heart. Something was about to emerge from the past. Margaret sat in the living room chair with the 2 letters on her lap. One written by her, the other by Jennifer. Both written on nights of pain. Both kept hidden for years, as if the words were afraid to be spoken aloud. Now, finally, they would be in the light. But it wouldn't be easy. Not at all. Before opening any envelope, she prayed silently. She asked for wisdom, discernment, and peace. She sensed something profound would be unleashed there. These weren't just letters. They were confessions. Shelved truths about to breathe. Margaret knew that when the soul opens old wounds, God must be close by. She began with her own letter. The handwriting was firm, but there were tear stains on the paper. Each sentence was a plea, a suppressed cry. "Daughter, if you ever read this, know that I love you with a love that transcends time, pride, and mistakes." Margaret wept again, as if the letter had been written that morning. It was a text filled with longing, but also with regret. "Forgive me for wanting to protect you so much that I forgot to listen to you. Forgive me for letting anger overcome tenderness." After finishing reading, Margaret kissed the paper and whispered, "Thank you, God, for allowing me to see my daughter again." But there was another letter to be read. With trembling hands, she opened Jennifer's envelope. The handwriting was more irregular, with crossed-out words and rewritten sentences. It was clearly a letter written in the heat of emotion. "Mom, I'm leaving because I can't live with this lump in my throat anymore. But I wanted you to know that I love you. I always have." Margaret held her breath. The letter was a mixture of pain, frustration, and a silent plea for love. "If you ever miss me, look up at the sky. Every time I'm sad, I'll do the same." Margaret looked up and saw the sun shining through the curtains. That sentence struck her like a prophecy. But what struck her most was the last paragraph. "I found out I was pregnant. And yet, the only thing I wanted was to hear you say it was going to be okay." Margaret put her hand to her chest. Her heart seemed to beat at a different frequency. Now everything made sense. Every silence. Every tear. Every escape. She put the letters away again, but not in the back of the drawer. He placed them both in a double glass frame he had received as a gift years ago. "These letters are witnesses to our story, and to God's faithfulness." Jennifer, seeing the frame on the shelf, was silent for long minutes. She simply hugged her mother. But not everything was rosy. The envelope left by the mysterious man was still on the table. Margaret decided to open it. Inside, next to the photo, was a typed sheet of personal information about a man named Anthony Cole. Margaret had never heard the name, but something about it was familiar. Anthony was Emily's father, and according to the document, he had been investigated for bank fraud and disappeared under a false identity. "Jennifer, did you know about this?" Her daughter shook her head slowly. "I knew something, but I never knew how serious it was." Emily, at that moment, entered the room, and the two fell silent. They decided to shield the girl from that burden. For now. But they knew that sooner or later they would have to tell her. Margaret called the church pastor, asking for guidance. He scheduled a meeting for that afternoon. "It's time to shed light on all this," he said. And they both accepted the invitation. In the pastor's office, as Jennifer explained her past, Margaret simply watched. It was like watching a wound finally heal. "The truth sets you free," he said tenderly. And he prayed with them, asking for protection for Emily and wisdom to deal with what would come. Because it would come. And quickly. On the way back, Jennifer held the frame with the letters in her lap. "Do you think Emily will ever understand?" Margaret replied firmly, "She will feel the love. And that's a start." But Jennifer knew her daughter's questions wouldn't be long in coming. She could already sense something was off. When they arrived home, they found something unexpected. The door was ajar. Margaret's heart raced. "I'm sure I locked it." They entered cautiously. Everything seemed in its place, until they realized that the drawer containing the envelope left by the mysterious man had been rummaged through. But it was still there. Only, the photo was missing. "Someone was here," Jennifer murmured. Margaret called the police, but with no evidence of a break-in, little could be done. The only clue was a shoe print on the front rug. "Not my size," Jennifer said, comparing it to hers. Emily, innocent, just drew on the couch. Margaret reinforced the locks that night. And he prayed aloud for the first time since Jennifer returned. "Lord, cover this house with your blood. Drive away all evil. Reveal the hidden. Protect this family, Father." Jennifer and Emily slept in the room together. Margaret stayed awake. Something was coming. The next morning, an anonymous letter appeared in the mailbox. No return address. No stamp. Just folded in 4 and bearing the words, "She needs to know the whole truth." Margaret froze. Who was she? Jennifer? Emily? And what truth was that? Another cycle had begun. Another wound would be touched. Jennifer read the letter, and her eyes widened. The letter said the man in the photo wasn't just Anthony Cole. He also had another name, David Harlan. And more than that, he had another family. Another daughter. Emily's sister. And that daughter was living in Nashville. Jennifer felt the ground disappear from under her. "So Emily has a sister," she whispered. Margaret just nodded. That changes everything. But how to tell a child this? How to explain that her father, whom she never knew, had left behind another daughter? Margaret held her daughter's hand and said, "What God joins together, man cannot separate." And sometimes, he joins stories with parts that seem lost. They decided to go to Nashville. See for themselves. Understand with their own hearts. Emily, excited, thought it would be a vacation. Jennifer knew it would be a journey of healing, or pain. Margaret carried the letters with her, like a talisman of faith. Little did they know that, upon arriving, they would find something that would change everything once again. Because when they knocked on the door of the house indicated, the one who answered wasn't a young woman. It was a woman. And what she said left everyone speechless. "Are you looking for my granddaughter? She disappeared 3 days ago." The story was far from over. And now, the past was coming back with even more force. The drive to Nashville was silent, marked by heavy thoughts and lost gazes out the window. Jennifer tried to remain calm, but her heart beat faster with every mile. Emily slept in the back seat, hugging her pink pillow. Margaret held the letters in her lap, as if they were both shield and compass. Something told her this trip would reveal much more than they expected. They arrived at the address late in the afternoon. It was a simple house with a well-kept garden and a blue-painted wooden porch. When they knocked on the door, They expected to see a young woman, perhaps one who looked like Emily. But the answer was a gray-haired woman with sad eyes. "Are you looking for Kayla?" she asked. Jennifer nodded. The woman took a deep breath. "She disappeared 3 days ago," the woman said. "She left the house saying she was going to the library, and never came back." The shock was immediate. Jennifer held her mother's arm, trying to contain her dizziness. "You're his family, aren't you?" the woman asked, bitterness in her voice. "Anthony's, or whatever name he used with you." Margaret stepped forward. "Yes, we are. And we come in peace. We just want to understand what's happening." The woman nodded slowly. "I'm Evelyn, Kayla's grandmother. I raised her after her mother. Well, after everything fell apart." Margaret offered to help with the disappearance. Evelyn hesitated, then replied, "Maybe it's time you knew everything." They entered. The room was filled with old photos. There was one of a young man in a suit, smiling, and even with the passage of time, Margaret recognized his eyes. "Was that Anthony?" she asked. Evelyn nodded. "He called himself David when he met my daughter. It all happened so quickly. Captivating, almost unreal. Then it turned into a nightmare." Evelyn said her daughter, Rachel, became pregnant a few months after meeting David. "He was kind, until he wasn't. Then came the disappearances, the lies, and finally the abandonment. When Rachel found out he had another life, another woman, she collapsed. Shortly after Kayla was born, Rachel took her own life. Evelyn gained custody of her granddaughter. Jennifer wept silently. Every word of the story was like a mirror of what her own life could have been. "He almost destroyed me too," she confessed. Evelyn stared at her. "Maybe you two are all that's left of him, and maybe you're also the key to saving Kayla." Margaret prayed silently in her mind. It was then that Evelyn revealed something important. Kayla had changed after receiving a mysterious letter. "She didn't tell me what it said, but she became strange. Thoughtful. More withdrawn." Margaret exchanged a tense look with Jennifer. "Another letter," she murmured. It was as if the past were writing a new story, through hidden words. Evelyn said Kayla attended a small church nearby. "The one on the corner, you know? The one with the stained glass windows." It was an old Methodist church, where many women gathered to pray every day at 7 in the morning. "She went there whenever she felt lost," Evelyn said. "Maybe someone saw something, or knew something. That was the next step." The next morning, Margaret woke before sunrise. She felt a restlessness in her chest. She left Jennifer and Emily sleeping, grabbed her coat, and walked to the church. Fog covered the streets like a veil, and the bell in the tower tolled softly. As she entered, she smelled old wood and a burning candle. A soft piano sound filled the air. In the corner, a lady in a lilac dress played an old melody. Margaret sat on the last bench, respecting the silence. The woman noticed her presence but continued playing. At the end of the song, she stood and walked slowly toward Margaret. "You're looking for someone," she said, before Margaret could say a word. "It's about the girl." Margaret shivered. "You know her?" The woman nodded. "Kayla came here every day. She sat there, on the third bench, always with the same notebook on her lap. She drew. She prayed. She cried." Margaret swallowed. "And the last few days, she came more restless, as if waiting for something." The woman looked into Margaret's eyes. She was scared. Margaret asked if Kayla had said anything about the letter. The woman responded with a vague gesture. "She showed me the envelope, but not the contents. She said it was from someone from her mother's past." Margaret felt the weight of the revelation. "Did she mention where it might go?" The woman shook her head. "But she did say one sentence that I didn't understand at the time. Now, maybe it makes sense. The sentence was, if he lied to them, he lied to me too. And I'm going to find out." Margaret felt a chill. Kayla was trying to piece it together. Understand who she was. Who her father was. What everyone had kept from her. She wants the truth, even if it hurts. The woman nodded. "And she'll need you to bear that truth." Margaret thanked him and left the church. Outside, Jennifer was already waiting for her. "You won't believe it," he said. "Emily dreamed about Kayla last night." Margaret paused. "What do you mean?" Jennifer looked at him seriously. She woke up saying she saw a sad girl sitting on a staircase with a book on her lap and a red rose on the ground. Margaret felt her eyes sting. They returned to Evelyn's house and told her about the dream. Evelyn was silent for a moment, then said, "There's a place nearby with a staircase, the prayer garden of the old convent. Kayla liked to go there. It was the only place they hadn't yet looked. And it was where, perhaps, all their stories intersected." Before they left, Evelyn handed Margaret a necklace. It belonged to her mother, Rachel. Kayla always wore it when she was sad. Margaret held the pendant tenderly. "We'll find her." Evelyn nodded. "But be prepared, because she might not be the same girl who disappeared." Upon arriving at the convent, the garden was deserted. Stone stairs, statues of angels, and red roses scattered across the ground. Margaret stopped. Emily looked around. "There," he pointed. A closed notebook rested on the third step. The cover was upturned, and the name Kayla was scrawled by hand. But there was no sign of her. Jennifer ran to the notebook and opened it. Inside were drawings. Many. A church, a cross, 3 women holding hands, and the silhouette of a man from behind. Margaret looked at the last drawing. It was her house. The house where they were now. Kayla knew. Kayla was coming after them. But why? And next to the notebook, a folded sheet of paper, "I will find the truth. But I must do it alone." Margaret's heart sank. She's close. But she's afraid. Jennifer looked at her mother. Will she come back? Margaret held tightly to Rachel's necklace. If God brought her this far, He will bring her back. In His time. It was a cold morning, with gray skies and winds that blew as if carrying secrets. Margaret woke before everyone else, as she always did, but that morning there was something different in the air. A strange, dense, almost prophetic silence. When she opened the front door to get the newspaper, she found a package on the floor. Small. Careful. No return address. Margaret's heart raced. She looked around. No one was on the street. She picked up the package with trembling hands. It was wrapped in craft paper, tied with a red ribbon. At the top were just 2 handwritten words, "For Emily." It was like a bolt of lightning in her chest. Emily was still asleep. Jennifer was too. But Margaret could already sense that this was no ordinary gift. She placed the package on the kitchen table without opening it. She said a silent prayer. "Lord, if this comes from good, may it bring peace. But if it comes from darkness, may your Spirit reveal the truth before evil enters this house." Jennifer appeared in the kitchen and saw the package. "Who brought this?" Margaret shook her head. "It was at the door when I woke up." They decided to wait until Emily woke up. When she saw the package, her eyes lit up. "It's for me," Margaret confirmed with a tight smile. "But let's open it together, okay?" Emily nodded excitedly. Untying the ribbon and opening the paper, she revealed a wooden box, delicately carved with roses and leaves. Inside was an unexpected object, a music box. As she turned the crank, a soft melody began to play. It was familiar. Margaret recognized it instantly. "Jesus Loves Me," the children's hymn she used to sing to Jennifer when she was little. The notes echoed through the house, stirring memories. Emily looked at her mother, confused. "Did you ever sing that to me, Mommy?" Jennifer shook her head. "But your grandmother used to sing it to me." At the bottom of the box, there was more. A small, neatly folded note. "Even when we're not remembered, God never forgets." Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you think it was Kayla?" Margaret nodded. "Or someone who knew her?" "That's too personal." But there was one more detail. Beneath the box's velvet lining, something was hidden. It was a photograph. Black and white. 2 children. One was clearly Jennifer. The other, an unknown girl, but with similar features. "Mom, do you remember this photo?" Margaret picked up her glasses. She looked closely. And then, an old, forgotten memory emerged like a morning breeze. That girl, was my sister's neighbor's daughter. She lived in Knoxville. Jennifer paled. What if she's Kayla's mother? What if these stories have been intertwined for longer than we realize? Margaret felt a shiver. God doesn't cross paths by chance. They decided to return to Evelyn's house, show her the gift, the photo, and look for more clues. Evelyn recognized the song and cried. Rachel used to sing this to Kayla when she was a baby. It was as if the puzzle pieces were falling into place, one by one. But who was behind the movements? Who knew so much about them? Evelyn, in a low voice, said, There's a woman who sometimes shows up at church, sits in the back pew, never talks to anyone. She always leaves something on the altar. Jennifer frowned. Like what? Letters. Small gifts. Written prayers. She never identifies herself. But it's as if she's asking for forgiveness, or trying to help from afar. Margaret decided they needed to see this woman. They went to church the next day, very early. They sat in the back, discreetly. Mass began. In the middle of the service, she entered. Navy blue coat, hair tied back, silent steps. She didn't realize she was being watched. She sat in the last pew, knelt, and remained there for several minutes. Then, discreetly, she placed a white envelope on the altar and left without looking back. Margaret got up and followed her. She called out to her at the church door. Please wait. The woman froze. She turned slowly. And then, everyone's faces fell into shock. It was Rachel. Or rather, someone who looked exactly like Rachel. Evelyn had said her daughter took her own life. But there she was, alive. Or was it someone else? Are you Rachel? Jennifer asked, her voice breaking. The woman shook her head. My name is Ruth. But there was panic in her eyes. Fear, pain, and a pent-up truth about to burst forth. Ruth confessed that she had known Anthony many years ago. He promised me love, and then used me. When I learned there were others, I despaired. I ran away. I pretended to be someone else. Jennifer tried to understand. You knew Rachel? Ruth nodded. She was like a sister. Before everything happened. Before him. Margaret took her hand. And Kayla. Ruth wept. She thought I was her mother. But I'm not. I was Rachel's nurse. When Rachel died, I promised to protect her. Evelyn knows. But she chose to hide it, so as not to cause more pain. The three of them fell silent. The truth seemed even more confusing. Evelyn later confirmed, it was true. Ruth saved Kayla. She saved us all. But then, who left the gift on the doorstep? Ruth said it was her. I wanted Emily to know she's loved. That God never forgets. Not me, not you, not her. Margaret wept. Jennifer hugged Ruth. Emily, seeing the scene, approached with a pure heart. Are you my sister's friend? Ruth smiled. Yes. And yours too. But before they left, Ruth left a warning. Kayla is trying to find answers. But someone is trying to silence her. Someone from Anthony's past. The atmosphere grew tense. She needs to be found before it's too late. Margaret looked at Jennifer. We need to act. And fast. The music box still played softly in the kitchen. Like a sacred reminder, God is in control. That morning, the sky dawned tinged with gold. It was as if God were painting hope in the clouds. Margaret woke before sunrise, her heart still heavy but determined. She grabbed her Bible, Rachel's necklace, and the music box. She went to the front yard, where she often talked to God. She sat on the wooden bench and closed her eyes. The prayer began not with words, but with tears. Sincere, heavy tears that cleansed the soul. Margaret didn't know where to begin. Lord, what do you want me to do? It was a simple question, but charged with centuries of motherhood, faith, pain, and redemption. I'm just a woman, but I'm here. Speak to me, Father. The first words came out softly, like a whisper. Thank you for bringing us this far. Thank you for not giving up on us. I know you're never late. But, God, please reveal where Kayla is. Show us what we must do. protect Emily, Jennifer, Ruth, and even those who have caused us pain. She paused, took a breath, and continued. As she prayed, she felt something different. A light breeze touched her face. It was like a caress, like a silent answer. "You're here. I know you are," she murmured. Margaret opened her eyes and saw, lying on the grass, a white feather. Small, simple, but in that moment, it felt like a divine signature. God was listening. Inside the house, Jennifer had also woken up. Seeing her mother in the garden, she sat at the kitchen table and did something she hadn't done in years. She prayed alone. "God, I don't even know where to begin. I walked away. I did everything wrong. But the truth is, I still believe. And I need your help. Show me who I am. Teach me how to be a mother." Just then, Emily entered the kitchen, clutching her sketchbook. "Mommy, I had another dream." Jennifer turned, alert. "What did you see, honey?" Emily pointed to a drawing. It was an open field with a small wooden house and a lone tree. She was there. The girl with the brown hair. Sitting, waiting for someone. Jennifer swallowed. "Do you remember where that house was?" Emily thought for a moment. She said, "Near the road where the flowers dance in the wind." Margaret walked into the kitchen at that moment. Hearing this, she stopped. That expression was used by Dorothy, the lady who took you in when you left home. Jennifer's eyes widened. Dorothy lived on an old farm, near a road full of sunflowers. The road where the flowers dance. Margaret immediately picked up the phone. She called a friend from church in Knoxville. "Do you remember Sister Dorothy's farm?" The friend replied, "She passed away, but the property is still in the family. It's empty now." Jennifer and Margaret exchanged glances. "It's there. I feel it." They got in the car and went with Evelyn and Ruth. Emily clutched her notebook tightly. The road there was long, but each mile felt like a step toward the truth. When they arrived, the landscape was identical to the drawing. The wooden house, the lone tree, and the absolute silence. Margaret got out of the car, her heart pounding. She walked to the porch. The door was ajar. They entered slowly, calling for Kayla. Nothing. The house was empty, but not abandoned. There were signs of recent presence, a glass on the sink, a towel folded on the bed, a Bible open to Psalm 27, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" Jennifer sat on the edge of the bed. She was here, alone, praying. Emily walked to the window and pointed. There's someone near the tree." Everyone rushed outside. But when they arrived, there was no one. Just a necklace hanging from the lowest branch. It was the necklace Kayla wore in the photos. And a note, "I'm okay. I'm closer than you think." It was Ruth who noticed a trail through the trees. She might have gone that way. But Margaret stopped. "Let's not chase her now. Let's pray." And there, under the tree, hand in hand, they prayed. A prayer that rose to heaven like a cry. Like music. Like a covenant. "Lord, protect Kayla. Reveal the truth. Use us to heal." On the way home, Emily dozed in the car, clutching the notebook like a treasure. Ruth, overcome with emotion, spoke to Evelyn. "I felt something in that tree. Like it was listening." Evelyn nodded. "God speaks in the silence. And Kayla is listening." Jennifer drove with tears in her eyes. "I need to learn to trust. In God. And in myself." When they arrived, they found an envelope in the mailbox. Another. Margaret opened it right there. A single sheet. One sentence. "She's ready. You need to be too." No signature. Jennifer looked at her mother. "Do you think this is from Kayla?" Margaret replied, "Or from someone helping her. But what scares me most is what comes next." That night, Margaret returned to the garden. And she prayed again. But this time, her prayer was different. It wasn't a cry. It was a surrender. "Lord, whatever comes, I accept it. Just don't abandon us." And that night, she dreamed. She dreamed of Rachel. She was smiling, at peace. "You're doing everything right," she said in the dream. "Keep going." Jennifer, in the next room, also dreamed. But hers was different. She dreamed of a dark room, where a door slowly opened. On the other side, a revelation. A name. A person no one imagined involved. When she woke, she wrote in her notebook, "What if her past is ours too?" Something was about to change. And at dawn, Ruth received a call. An unknown number. A female voice on the other end. "You know the truth. Now it's time to tell it. Before someone else does it for you." Ruth trembled. She hung up without saying anything. But she knew. This was more than a warning. It was an ultimatum. Time was running out. It was an ordinary morning in Johnson City, but there was something different in the air. Jennifer restlessly ran her fingers through the pages of Emily's notebook. Each drawing seemed clearer now, as if Emily had grasped something unseen. Margaret prepared coffee, trying to keep the routine going. But everyone knew they were waiting for something. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. 3 knocks, soft but firm. Margaret felt a chill. Jennifer ran to the window. It was a young woman, gray sweatshirt, backpack over her shoulders, brown hair loose, deep-set eyes. "It's her," Jennifer murmured. Margaret didn't need to confirm. She knew. It was Kayla. And she was there, alive. Standing before them. Margaret opened the door with trembling hands. For a moment, no one said anything. Time stood still. Their eyes met. Kayla looked at Jennifer like someone who finds something they've always sought but are afraid to touch. Jennifer stepped forward. "Kayla." The girl nodded. "It's me." Her voice was weak but firm. She was ready. Emily appeared in the hallway. Seeing Kayla, she stopped. She watched with curious eyes. Then she smiled. "Are you my sister?" Kayla stared at her for several long seconds, and then fell to her knees, crying. Margaret ran and hugged her. Jennifer knelt too. Emily, not quite understanding, walked over and hugged them both. 4 generations there. Finally reunited. After several minutes, everyone entered. Silence still reigned, but it was a sacred silence, full of meaning. Kayla sat in the armchair where Rachel used to sit, according to Evelyn. Margaret served tea and cookies, as she always did in difficult times. Jennifer sat across from her. "You're safe now. And you don't have to run anymore." Kayla looked into Emily's mother's eyes. "I ran away because I didn't know who I was. And now, I still don't know everything, but I know what I don't want to be." Margaret smiled tenderly. "And what do you want to be?" Kayla took a deep breath. "I want to be someone free. Someone with truth. Even if it hurts." Ruth, who had arrived shortly before, couldn't hold back her tears. The emotion was so intense that no one understood the envelope Kayla was holding until she handed it over. "I found this at the farm. It was under the floorboards. It was for you, Margaret." It was an old letter, in Anthony's handwriting. Margaret felt her hands tremble. When she opened it, the contents made her breath catch. "If you're reading this, it's because you've come this far. The truth is, I never knew how to love properly. I ran from myself, from guilt, from shame. And I hurt those who needed me most. But Kayla, she has a light. And that light needs to be protected. Even from me." Margaret closed her eyes. He knew. He knew the evil was inside him. Jennifer asked if Kayla had seen Anthony after he disappeared. She nodded. "Once. On a bus. He didn't speak to me. He just smiled, and disappeared into the crowd." Ruth sighed. "He was like that. He always appeared when we least expected it. Like a ghost." Evelyn watched silently. The truth was hard to swallow. But Margaret took the lead. "What matters now is that she's here. And we're together. We'll rebuild." Emily brought the sketchbook and placed it on Kayla's lap. "You can draw here too, if you want." Kayla smiled. "Thank you." For the first time, there was lightness in her eyes. But there were still questions. That night, they had a simple but meaningful dinner. They prayed before eating. Kayla held Jennifer and Margaret's hands. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she said. And before he went to sleep, he left a note on Jennifer's pillow, "Don't forget me again." Jennifer kept it as a lasting reminder. But in the early hours of the morning, Kayla had a nightmare. She screamed. She sweated. When Jennifer arrived in the room, she found her sitting there, trembling. "I saw him. Again. He said someone here isn't who they seem." Jennifer tried to calm her. "It was just a dream." But Kayla stared at her. "No. It was a warning." Margaret heard it all. And she didn't doubt it. The next day, Ruth revealed something she'd been keeping to herself for years. Before Rachel died, she told me Anthony had a twin brother. One who was committed to a clinic. But no one knew about it. Jennifer paled. "So, could it be him?" Margaret nodded. "What if he's here? Nearby? Watching?" The fear returned. Kayla pulled out her notebook and drew the man from her dream. His face was identical to Anthony's, but with a scar on the left side. Margaret looked at him and shivered. "I've seen this man before." Jennifer's eyes widened. "When?" Margaret took a deep breath. "At the market. A few days ago. He told me he liked roses, and smiled as if he knew me." Ruth remembered something. His name was Caleb. Rachel hated that name. Evelyn added, she said Caleb was the dark side of the family. Jennifer stood. "If he's around, then Kayla is in danger. And so are we." Margaret held the cross from Rachel's necklace. "God will protect us. But we need to be alert." That afternoon, the local pastor was called. They prayed over the house. They anointed the doors and windows. It was a moment of profound surrender. Margaret led the prayer. "Lord, may no force of darkness prevail against this home. May your Spirit reign here. And may every lie be revealed. In the name of Jesus." Everyone said, "Amen," with a firm heart. At the end of the day, Emily drew something new. A house with open windows, birds flying, and 4 women holding hands. "That's us, isn't it?" she asked. Margaret smiled. "Yes, my love." Kayla hugged Emily and whispered, "You are my light." Jennifer watched with teary eyes. Love was winning. But danger still lurked. And then, as dusk fell, a black car pulled up across the street. A man got out. He stood there, just watching the house. Kayla saw him through the window. "That's him," she whispered. Margaret approached slowly. When her eyes met his, everything became clear. It was the same smile. The same scar. But it wasn't Anthony. That night, no one slept well. The image of the man standing across the street haunted every thought. Kayla was sure it wasn't Anthony. But it was someone with the same face. The same look in her eyes. Margaret remained in constant prayer, like a silent wall protecting the house. Jennifer, for her part, began to investigate. She rummaged through all the old folders, photos, letters, anything that might hint at Anthony or Caleb. That's when she found a letter Rachel had written to Ruth, but it had never been sent. Inside, a shocking secret. Rachel said Anthony had confessed to having a twin brother, and that this brother had committed a serious crime in his youth. He said his brother carried a darkness he couldn't explain. Something spiritual, deep. He said his brother saw things, heard voices. Ruth read the letter silently. Rachel was afraid of him. Very afraid. Jennifer held the letter tightly. So maybe it wasn't Anthony making those threats. It was Caleb. Margaret remembered something disturbing. There was a time when Anthony showed up here. Different. He was saying nonsense. He spoke in different voices. I thought it was drugs. But now I wonder, Kayla interrupted her, what if it was Caleb pretending to be Anthony? A shiver ran down everyone's spine. The next morning, Margaret decided to do what she'd been avoiding for years. She went to her sister's old house, where she'd met Anthony for the first time. The house was closed, but their neighbor, Mr. Don, still lived next door. Upon seeing her, he said, "You're back, after everything that happened." Margaret felt the weight of those words. "After what?" she asked. Mr. Don said that, months before Anthony disappeared, Two men had gotten into a big fight inside the house. One of them escaped, injured. We thought it was a drunken brawl, but now I think it was the two brothers. One of them had a scar on his face. Margaret almost fell backward. Caleb. The neighbor nodded. That's right. He disappeared after that day. Jennifer went to the local police station and requested access to old records. And she found something surprising. Caleb had been admitted to a psychiatric institution in Memphis in the 1990s and released in 2004. No one has heard from him since. But there was a note in the medical record, danger to self and others. Diagnosis, dissociative psychosis. Ruth, upon hearing this, broke down. I remember now. Rachel received a visit a week before she died. A man with cold eyes, who claimed to know her past. Margaret felt her hands go cold. It was him. Kayla trembled with fear. He's after me. He thinks I'm Rachel's continuation. He wants to finish what he started. That night, Ruth told her something no one else knew. Rachel told me Caleb tried to take her away, saying she was his. As if he mistook her for someone else. But Rachel escaped. And then, everything fell apart. Jennifer closed her eyes. He's confused, obsessed, and now he's seen Kayla. Margaret stood up. We're not leaving her alone. Evelyn called a lawyer friend of the family and secured a temporary restraining order. But they knew this wouldn't stop Caleb from taking action. They needed to understand what he wanted, why he was there, and what he knew. It was then that Ruth revealed the biggest bombshell of all. Rachel. I never wanted to tell you who Kayla's real father was. Jennifer frowned. Are you saying Anthony wasn't the father? Ruth nodded silently. Margaret's eyes widened. Oh my God. Ruth took a deep breath. Rachel always said Kayla was good born from evil. That what she went through was indescribable. But one day she said to me, the wrong brother paid the price. Everyone was silent for a long time. It was too much pain to process. Ruth wept silently. Jennifer, stunned, simply held her daughter's hand. Margaret closed her eyes and prayed, Lord, let the truth come out, even if it hurts. Kayla then spoke for the first time, evil will not win. I am living proof of that. That night, Jennifer decided to do something unexpected. She recorded a video with Kayla, telling part of their story. They posted it in a closed church group, asking for prayers. The next day, they received a private message. A man claimed to know Caleb. He claimed to have been his colleague at the clinic. And he said Caleb was close. Very close. He's living in a trailer on the outskirts of town. He talks about you all the time. He says, the women of light need to be erased. Margaret shuddered. That's spiritual. Evelyn suggested a prayer vigil. And that very night, more than 20 women gathered in the living room. Hands clasped, knees on the floor, crying out to the heavens. The atmosphere was dense. But there was faith. And when one of the women prayed in tongues, Kayla burst into tears. I felt something lift from me. Like a fear I'd always carried. Margaret approached, laid her hands on her and said, You are free in the name of Jesus. Free to live. Free to begin again. Tears fell like rain. But in the middle of the prayer, the doorbell rang. Everyone fell silent. Margaret approached the door slowly. She looked through the peephole. There was no one there. Just an envelope on the floor. She carefully picked it up, opened it, and found a recent photo. Emily and Kayla playing in the backyard. Taken from a distance. The message on the back, what is born in pain, can die in fear. Jennifer panicked. The police were called. But again, with no evidence of a break-in, nothing could be done. It was then that Kayla spoke up. I think I know where he'll be waiting for me. Margaret asked, How do you know? Kayla pointed to Emily's sketchbook. A new drawing. The tree. The road. The empty house. And a shadow lurking. That's where it all began. It was as if everything had led to this moment. Kayla, standing in the entryway of the old house, took a deep breath, her heart racing. Beside her, Jennifer held her hand tightly. If you ever want to stop, "We'll come back," she said. Kayla looked at her mother tenderly. "No. I need this. For me. For Rachel. For the truth." Margaret stayed in the car, praying softly, with Emily in her lap. The girl stared out the window, as if knowing something sacred was about to happen. Ruth, beside Evelyn, also couldn't take her eyes off the house. Time seemed suspended. And then the door opened. Caleb was there. Hair messy, eyes intense. A strange smile on his face. "You came," he said. Kayla nodded, unafraid. "You called me. I'm here." Caleb took a step forward, but Jennifer intervened. "Don't come any closer." He laughed. "You still don't understand. I don't want to hurt anyone. I want to finish." Jennifer cringed. "Finish what?" Caleb looked up at the sky. "The story. How it started." Inside the house, the atmosphere was dark and damp. Old photographs hung on the walls. Many of them were of Anthony, others of Rachel, and one of Kayla as a baby. "I've watched you my whole life," Caleb said. "You're half of what I lost. Half of what I have left." Kayla trembled, but stood her ground. "You have no power over me." Caleb stopped. For the first time, his eyes filled with tears. "Rachel was my world. And when she died, I died too. All that's left is this shadow here." Jennifer whispered, "Did you do that to her?" Caleb lowered his head. "I loved her. But love changed." Ruth fought back tears. "You destroyed everything." The tense moment was interrupted by something unexpected. Kayla stepped closer. She looked into Caleb's eyes and said, "I forgive you." The words echoed like silent thunder. Jennifer tried to pull her back. "Kayla." But the girl didn't move. "I forgive you. Because if I don't, I'll carry you inside me forever." Caleb fell to his knees. He began to cry like a child. This wasn't an act. This was real pain, regret, despair. Margaret entered the house with Emily in her arms. "Let's pray." Everyone held hands. Caleb, sobbing, repeated, "I just wanted to go back. But I didn't know how." Margaret looked at him. "That's how you go back, on your knees." Prayer filled the house. The spiritual darkness was being broken. Caleb, for the first time in decades, felt peace. And Kayla felt freedom. When they stood, the air seemed lighter. Ruth approached Caleb and said, "You must surrender. Pay for what you did. But now, do it like a man, not like a shadow." He nodded. The police were called. Caleb didn't resist. He confessed everything. The kidnapping, the obsession, the years of stalking. He was taken away in silence. But something in him had changed. Margaret hugged Jennifer. Jennifer hugged Kayla. And then, for the first time, Kayla turned and held out her arms to Emily. The two embraced. A hug after a lifetime apart. Ruth, overcome with emotion, placed Rachel's necklace around Kayla's neck. "You're going to write a new story." Evelyn, crying, picked up one of Emily's drawings and said, "Look, it's exactly how she drew it. The house, the people, the hug." Margaret smiled. Children's faith sees what adults' pain hides. That night, Margaret made a special dinner. Nothing fancy. Just each of their favorites: pancakes, macaroni and cheese, chicken soup, and chocolate chip cookies. They prayed before the meal. Emily prayed, "Jesus, thank you that we are a family now. Bless Grandma, Mom, Kayla, Ruth, and even the sad boy who left." The old letters were burned in a small bonfire in the backyard. Not out of anger, but as a symbol. The past would no longer be a prison. It would be a testimony. Margaret read a verse aloud, "And behold, I make all things new." The flames danced, as if in confirmation. And above them, the stars reappeared. In the following days, Kayla began therapy. Jennifer returned to school. Margaret started a prayer group with other women. Emily wrote her first illustrated story, The Girl Who Saw the Future in the Sky. Ruth decided to travel for a while. She needed to breathe. But she left a note in Margaret's Bible, "You were my answer to prayer." Time passed, but the scars remained. Marks of struggle, of faith, of forgiveness, and most of all, of reconciliation. Margaret said that every scar told a miracle. Emily grew up hearing that phrase. And Kayla? Well, Kayla volunteered at a girls' shelter. Every time someone asked her why, she'd say, "Because someone believed in me." Years later, Margaret retold the story at a women's retreat. She spoke of the pain. But even more so, she spoke of the power of forgiveness. At the end of the talk, a woman stood up in tears and said, "You don't know, but the man who destroyed my family was also named Caleb." Margaret smiled. "Then you understand. God can do anything." In the garden, Kayla planted a tree. Next to it, she placed a small wooden sign, "Where pain ends, truth begins." Emily painted butterflies around it. Jennifer watered it carefully. Ruth, when she returned, cried when she saw the tree. Rachel would have loved this. Margaret replied, "And she still does. Because now, everything is at peace." But one afternoon, while Margaret was watering the flowers, she received a letter. No return address. Just 2 words, "Thank you. B.C." She stood still. The envelope trembled in her hands. It was the final piece. The final cycle. The end of one story, or the beginning of another. She smiled. God still had more to write. Maybe, after all this, you're there, in silence, thinking of someone who's gone. Or someone who's still close, but distant in your heart. Maybe there's a Kayla inside you. Or maybe you're Margaret, praying for years for a reunion. What matters is that, while there's life, there's time. And where there's faith, there will always be miracles. How many letters have you failed to send out of pride? How many hugs have you missed out on fear? What if today were the day to take a step back? To call. To write. To pray for those who seem unreachable. Because, as we saw in this story, the impossible doesn't exist when God is at the center. He even transforms tears into reunions. Have you ever experienced something similar? Is there someone you miss but don't know where to start? What would you do if you received an unexpected call at 3 in the morning? Share with me in the comments. Let's talk. Let's pray together. You are not alone. And this story could be yours too. If this message touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This helps us continue to share stories of faith, hope, and new beginnings with others. Stories that inspire, that heal, that remind us that forgiveness is still possible, and that love always has the final word. And now, think carefully. Who is the person God is asking you to forgive today? Who is the daughter, sister, mother, or granddaughter who needs to hear that there is still time? Maybe your hug will be the next miracle.